Hey everyone, I'm Ashes,
And I'm Will. And
and this
this
is
is
Ashes
Ashes
and
and
Will
Will
Do
Do Disney.
Disney.
Each week, one of us will tell the other the history, facts, and stories behind the rides and attractions of Disney that have made special memories for generations.
Keep in mind that Ashes and Will Do Disney is not affiliated with or employed by the Walt Disney Company, and our views and opinions do not reflect theirs.
Now it's time to sit back, relax, and put on your ears because it's time for Ashes and Will Do Disney. We're back again. How
Hey.
are you doing?
Oh, I'm pretty good. How about you?
Good, good. Ready to rock on another episode here?
I am. What have you got for me today?
Well, I like to do the which this are you, which that are you quizzes.
Yeah.
So we've done which couple are you, which villain are you. But let's look at this one where it's not necessarily which this or that are you. This is Disney, again from Oh My Disney, making a very bold claim
Ooh.
that says, "We know your relationship status based on your Disney park preferences."
What?
So again, I've already taken this quiz. I've gotten my result. So I
Okay.
want to see what you get here. Now, normally I don't tell you what I answered. I
Yeah.
usually keep that a secret here. This time, as we go through, I will say what we did or what my answers were after you give your answer.
Okay, I'm super intrigued.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued to see what you get here. What is your favorite Walt Disney World park? Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Disney's Hollywood Studios, or Disney's Animal Kingdom?
Well, I know you're going to say Magic Kingdom, but
Correct.
I'm going to say Epcot.
Epcot, okay. What is your favorite area of Disneyland? Fantasyland, Tomorrowland, Adventureland, or Frontierland?
Frontierland has Pirates and Haunted Mansion, right?
Well, it's near that. That's kind of closer to New Orleans Square.
Oh, yeah. What's in Frontierland?
Like Tom Sawyer's thing and
Okay, it's not that one then. So, Tomorrowland,
Fantasyland, Adventureland, or Frontierland.
Tomorrowland.
Okay, that's also what I said.
Okay.
Pick your favorite mountain attraction in a Disney park. Splash Mountain, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad,
Okay.
Space Mountain, or
Okay.
Expedition Everest.
Oh, that's hard. I really do like, I think I'm going to pick Space Mountain.
I figured.
But
I'm
yeah.
surprised you had to think about it that much. I said Big Thunder
No,
Mountain.
I like the other one you had said, I can't remember the name of it now. What, name them again?
Expedition Everest?
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
I like that one a lot too. So that was my pause for thought because that one is a lot of fun.
Okay.
So,
Which character would you most like to meet at a Disney park? Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse, Pluto, or Donald Duck?
I mean, it's a little bit boring, honestly.
That's
Just the
some of the core
traditional ones.
characters. What do you
I
mean it's
know,
boring?
because I want to meet like Moana. And okay, but of those four, I would probably go for, we'll say Minnie.
Okay, I said Mickey.
I figured.
What is your favorite Disney park's food? Churro, turkey leg, corn dog, or a Mickey pretzel?
Oh, churro. What? There was a serious lack of desserts in that.
There was. If they didn't put it in there, I would have said churro, but they put in the Mickey pretzel, so that's what I
Oh
picked.
yeah, I'm sticking with churro.
I figured. Remember when we got those turkey legs at Disney World?
Yeah,
We'd
and they
seen them
were
all day.
awful.
Yeah, we saw them all day. We're all set. We're like, that's dinner tonight. We're getting a turkey leg. We get back for one of the parades, go get a turkey leg, and it was terrible.
Yeah, not good.
Not good at all. What would you rather do at a Disney park? Watch the afternoon parade? Watch the nighttime parade? Watch the fireworks? Or watch a live show?
Ooh, fireworks.
I also said watch the fireworks. What is your favorite season to visit a Disney park? Winter, spring, summer, or fall?
Fall.
I also said fall. That was the last question. All right, so real interesting here.
Okay.
So again, real bold claim. Disney says they can figure out your relationship status.
Right. And we only had a couple answers different.
We did. We did. And I just want to preface here, too. Ashes and I celebrated 15 years of marriage over the summer here.
Yep.
So Disney's bold claim was a little too bold.
Uh-oh.
So you're single.
Ooh.
You are single and ready to mingle, or at least ready to go to your favorite Disney park.
I mean, I'm always ready to go to my favorite Disney park.
Right? You ready for mine?
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Ooh.
So you may or may not be in a relationship. Let's just say it's complicated. Nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing complicated about spending a day at a Disney park.
Wow, I wonder what you had to do to actually be married then.
Right.
Not
right.
eat a churro.
And not have a churro, maybe go somewhere besides Magic Kingdom? I don't know.
I went to Epcot.
I don't know.
Hmm.
But apparently we're not together according to this quiz.
Well, that's cool. I'm single and ready to mingle.
I might be with you.
Maybe, but I'm not with you.
No, you're not.
Wow, that was fun.
It was fun. A little interesting. A little too brash.
I mean,
for their claim of being able to tell what we are.
Kind of funny, though. I felt it was pretty accurate last time you had one, and I was Cruella de Vil.
I thought it was pretty good there. But that's the first one where it was way off base, I think, for both of us.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So last week, we talked about the history of the Star Wars film franchise.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that you may have thought about that came to mind?
Oh, I still think all the history of like the toys behind it were super cool.
That was fun. I did enjoy looking into the history of the merchandise. So I told you last week that we'd follow up this week to look into the acquisition of LucasFilms by Disney.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited to talk about this. I got most of my information from Bob Iger's book, Ride of a Lifetime.
Awesome.
So his autobiography where he talks about becoming CEO of Disney. And
yeah.
There's a whole chapter on how he acquired Lucasfilms. And the Pixar deal had happened with Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
We'll get into a bit more detail on that down the road.
I'm excited for that one.
That's going to be a good one.
That whole story is so cool.
And Bob Iger had gone to talk to Steve Jobs about the idea of buying Marvel. Jobs had asked him if he had any other deals he wanted to do, and Iger mentioned that he was interested in Lucasfilms. Steve Jobs had bought Pixar from George Lucas, and they were still close. So Jobs offered to take Iger to lunch to meet with George Lucas.
So it's the three of them.
Yes, so there would be three of them because Steve Jobs had that relationship with George Lucas.
I do remember watching in the Pixar film that George Lucas and Pixar were, I don't know, collaborating or whatever, working together.
Right. And sadly, Jobs had lost his battle with cancer before that lunch could happen.
Oh, sad.
And after the Marvel deal had been completed, Lucasfilms was at the top of the acquisition list for Disney. But Bob Iger had to think of a way to present the idea to George Lucas that wouldn't offend him. Star Wars and Disney already had an existing relationship. In the 1980s, Michael Eisner had a licensing agreement to build Star Wars and Indiana Jones attractions at the parks. And in May 2011, Disney was reopening Star Tours in Disneyland and Disney World. And George Lucas was going to go to Orlando to rededicate the attractions. Now, Bob Iger usually leaves the opening of the attractions to the head of parks and resorts, but he saw this as an opportunity to break the ice with Lucas about buying Lucasfilms. And Iger wanted to get a feel as to if Lucas would even consider selling Lucasfilms. Iger had known George Lucas after Iger worked for ABC and helped run Twin Peaks. The success of that show had directors proactively reaching out to do work with the company. And George Lucas had pitched the idea of Young Indiana Jones. And Young Indiana Jones was meant to be educational, and each episode would be a quote-unquote history lesson. And it would follow the young Indy as he interacted with different historical figures.
Oh, kind of like a PBS thing almost.
That's the vibe I got from it. It was almost like PBS. I do remember watching a couple episodes of it. It wasn't my favorite. So I don't even remember what the episodes were. I just remember it being on TV.
I never even knew it was a thing.
It was a thing. In 1992, the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles aired on ABC on Monday nights before Monday Night Football. And initially the show was popular, but eventually audiences didn't care as much for the history lessons of the show, and ratings started to fall. But Bob Iger felt that he at least owed it to Lucas to give him a second season of the show, to try and re-grab the viewer's attention. But the show never did catch back on.
I mean, it doesn't sound the most entertaining.
And like I said, I know I watched some of it, but I can't remember anything about it.
Oh well.
Yeah, oh well. Now the deal begins. On the day of the rededication, Bob Iger set up a breakfast to meet with George Lucas. When Lucas arrived, he was expecting more people, but was surprised to see that only Iger was there. And about halfway through the breakfast, Iger dipped his toes into the water and asked Lucas if he'd ever thought about selling LucasFilms. Iger took the approach that Lucas didn't have any heirs to run the company, and while there were people in place to keep the doors open, Iger wanted Lucas to consider having someone in place to keep his legacy alive. So basically someone who would care about the company, not just run it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Lucas told Iger that he wasn't ready to sell the company, but also acknowledged Iger's points and told him that if he were to sell, he would want to sell to Iger.
Okay, I mean, sounds like a nice productive breakfast.
It's a good start here, and the main thing being is that Lucas appreciated the chance for young Indiana Jones and also liked the way that Iger had taken care of Pixar. George Lucas said something to Iger that stuck with him in every conversation they had about the acquisition. Lucas had stated that when he died, the first line of his obituary was going to say, quote-unquote, Star Wars creator George Lucas, ... So that's what he was going to be known for, was Star Wars.
Gotcha.
Star Wars had become such a huge part of Lucas's identity that Iger didn't treat the deal as buying a business, but as a means to help preserve a legacy. After the conversation of the rededication day, Iger did not follow up with Lucas. Because of the sensitivity of the subject, Iger knew that the ball was in Lucas's court, and Lucas had to be the one to bring it back up when he was ready. So it was a mutual respect thing. He asked, he's going to leave it alone until George Lucas is ready to talk again.
Bob Iger is a smart man.
He is a smart man and considerate.
For sure.
Around 7 months later, George Lucas called Bob Iger and asked him to have lunch so they could talk about the subject more. During this lunch, Lucas said he was ready to talk about selling and that he wanted the Pixar deal. Iger was excited that Lucas was ready to talk shop, but Disney had acquired Pixar for $7.4 billion. And while Iger saw Lucasfilms as a valuable commodity, he did not feel that it was worth the same amount as Pixar, thus making Iger realize right then that negotiations for this acquisition were not going to be easy. When Disney started the move on Pixar, there were already 6 movies in production, and they knew they could turn a profit on that quickly.
Yeah.
So basically they were going to buy it and already were going to have product to put out.
Yeah.
Pixar also had a group of tenured directors and engineers that came with the deal. And while Lucas had a strong team of employees on the tech side, there were no directors other than George Lucas. So it's a much smaller team and a lot less that's coming with the deal.
Not 6 movies in the works.
Right, that's exactly right. There were also no films in the Lucasfilms pipeline at that time. The other problem is that Lucasfilms was not a publicly traded company, which meant their financial information wasn't publicly accessible, and Disney's valuation of the company was based solely on guesses.
Oh, that's rough.
That's rough. It's hard to get a strong valuation when you can't actually see the numbers behind the company. Projection of what they might do if they bought the company was to release new Star Wars films every other year for the first 6 years of the acquisition. So,
That's
every
quite
2
the
years.
Undertaking, yeah.
They estimated that the first release would be in May of 2015, with other films coming out in 2017 and 2019. So we talked about that a little bit here with the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy. Those movies came out in May.
Yeah.
The new trilogy came out in December. We'll get into that a little bit more, but we had talked about that, how they broke that May release streak with the new trilogy. Disney also had to project what their Star Wars films would produce, which was pure conjecture. They had to sit there and guess of how much money are we going to make off of making Star Wars films.
It's quite the gamble.
It's a gamble. So they looked at the reviews of previous films and their box office numbers and projected that their first 3 films could do about $1 billion. Again, this is all a guess, just based off of past numbers.
Yeah.
And as they say, past numbers are not a predictor of future performance.
Yeah, not at all.
They also had to examine the licensing of Star Wars. Star Wars toys were still popular with young males, particularly Legos and lightsabers. And they were excited by the idea of adding the product to their Disney line, but they still didn't have access to the actual revenue that these toys generated.
Oh.
Because again, it's not publicly traded, so all that information is not just readily available to the public.
Saying. Okay.
And I just want to say too, just a quick side note from another podcast I listened to. It's really cool because right here that sticks out to me. It says Star Wars toys were popular with young males. So there's a lady by the name of Ashley Eckstein.
Okay.
She is the voice of a character on the Star Wars Clone Wars series.
Okay.
And she loves Star Wars. And she wanted to be able to get Star Wars clothes for females.
Yeah.
But she was basically told, hey, look, there's not a female audience for that, so just be happy with a men's small.
No, rude.
Yeah, she didn't like that. So she talked to Disney about making a women's line and a girls' line of Star Wars clothes. And they basically said, we do licensing agreements. So if you're serious about this, like, go make a company. So she did.
Oh, wow.
It's a company we've ordered from. It's Her Universe.
Oh, we've definitely ordered stuff from them.
Yep, and she did that with the intention of making merchandise for females.
Nice.
And it turns out there is an audience of females that want Star Wars merchandise. Obviously, she does more than Star Wars merch.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what have inspired it.
Haunted Mansion and
Haunted
Nightmare
Mansion,
Before Christmas
stuff like
stuff.
that. You got it. So I thought that was really cool.
That is cool.
Now, Bob Iger also had to look at the park attractions. They already had the licensing agreement to do Star Tours. And Iger had big ideas of what he could do, but he didn't include park attractions in the valuation because there was too much of an unknown variable. Now, of course, as Bob Iger predicted, Lucas felt his company was just as valuable as Pixar. But even doing a valuation based on guesses and unknowns, Disney did not see that kind of value in the company. Iger didn't want to offend Lucas by telling him that his company wasn't worth what he thought it was, but he also didn't want to lead him on in a deal where he wasn't going to get what he was expecting. Iger didn't want to promise something that he knew he would have to go back on later.
Yeah, I mean, duh.
Right. It's a matter of he didn't want to say, yes, we'll make this deal, and then have to backtrack and renegotiate it down the road.
We're not talking about a small amount of money here either.
No, not at all. And Iger knew that if he tried to get Lucas's hopes up just to go into a bargaining conversation, it would completely kill the deal. So Iger was upfront with George Lucas and said, there's no way this is a Pixar deal, George. Lucas had been taken aback by the statement, but then he asked, well then, what do we do? Iger told him they had to have access to their financial records to get a fair valuation. Iger even offered to sign a confidentiality agreement that wouldn't draw attention to what they were doing.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, you don't want it to hit the headlines.
I mean, I feel like it's a fair ask, though, to want to look at that information.
And not just for Disney's sake, but to make sure it's fair to George Lucas as well.
Yeah.
From a money standpoint, anyway. Yeah. Iger assured Lucas that he wouldn't do standard negotiating tactics. That is to say, he wouldn't start low, then negotiate to get somewhere in the middle. He would come up with a valuation that he could get the board to approve, and he'd present it to Lucas. So basically he was saying, I'm just going to come to you with what we think is fair. I'm not going to start here and we just bargain to the middle. It's just this is what we're going to offer. Here's what we think is fair.
Yeah.
After all of this, Disney still couldn't land on a strong valuation. The reason being was based on the movies. Since there were no movies in production, Disney had to evaluate their ability to make good movies and if they could do it quickly. Now we start looking at the price tag that goes into buying LucasFilms. Iger called Lucas to tell him they were still working on a final valuation, which would be somewhere between $3.5 billion to $3.75 billion.
Okay, so, I mean, we're talking like half of what?
Quite a bit lower than the Pixar deal.
Yeah.
So Lucas accepted that he was going to take a big step down from the Pixar deal, but they also knew that he wasn't going to accept anything less than what Disney had paid for Marvel, which was $4 billion.
Okay, but I don't know, maybe I'm just not as big of a fan of Star Wars as Marvel, but I feel like Marvel's so much more involved and has so many more storylines than Star Wars.
And you have to think about it too, when Disney bought Marvel, they had already started their solo films and were leading towards the Avengers movies. And
Yeah.
Disney bought it and picked it up from where they left off, essentially. They weren't starting from scratch, so that's why it was a little bit more.
Yeah.
As far as evaluation.
I mean, it's not like Marvel was a small name then either.
No.
So.
But keeping in mind, too, Star Wars isn't a small name either.
Well, I know. I just
even
feel
without
like
movies in the pipeline.
George Lucas has a little bit of a big head with this.
Yeah, but a little bit rightfully so.
I guess. I guess if you asked any diehard fan.
Exactly. So they decided that they would offer Lucas $4.05 billion, and Lucas immediately agreed to that price.
Just essentially a hair above.
A hair above Marvel, but it was more than Marvel, and it's technically more than what they told him they were valuating the company at.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, right off the bat, it's, hey, here you go. We told you it's worth less than this, but we're still going to pay you more.
Cool. I mean, I wish I had $4 billion.
I mean, it'd be nice. So after they had negotiated the price, they had to get over the next hurdle. How involved would George Lucas be in the creative process after the company was purchased? So when we talk about creative involvement and we look at the Pixar deal, that hinged on John Lasseter and Ed Catmull staying on and involved with Pixar and with Disney Animation. With Marvel, Iger collaborated with Kevin Feige in the films they had in development. So Kevin Feige, he's the big name in Marvel. He's involved with everything. He's like the face that comes out whenever a movie comes out or whatever they're announcing. He's the one to announce it and talk about it.
I was like, I know John Lasseter, but...
Right. So with LucasFilms, there was only one person with creative control, and that was George Lucas.
But I thought he didn't want to do anything else.
He didn't want to make the movies. That was his big thing. He didn't want to make the movies. So you think about it, he was writing them, directing them, producing them, doing all that stuff beforehand.
Okay.
So now he's at the point where he doesn't want to make movies anymore. That doesn't mean he doesn't want to have input.
Okay.
So George Lucas wanted to maintain his creative control without becoming an employee, because in the Marvel and Pixar deals, those that came on reported to Bob Iger.
Gotcha.
So basically, George Lucas wanted to sell his company for $4.05 billion.
And still be in charge of
and be in charge of everything without having to do what other people told him, which Bob Iger couldn't justify spending a little over $4 billion to essentially let George Lucas still run everything any way he wanted and on whatever schedule he wanted.
I mean, I'm going to side with Bob Iger on this one. Like,
I am too. That's literally like, give me $4 billion to keep doing what I was going to do anyways.
Yeah, you can just put your name like next to mine.
Right. I wouldn't take that deal.
No way.
No way. Disney also knew they couldn't pay what they were paying and be able to give George everything he wanted. And Iger knew telling him this, it's going to put the deal at risk.
Well, I don't think anyone else is lining up to pay him $4 billion either right now, though.
Yeah, right. And I don't think he had talked to anybody else about doing this either.
Yeah.
So now the deal is at risk. George didn't want to let go of control for the Star Wars saga. Disney didn't think it made sense in the deal for him to retain control. Because again, they're buying this.
Yeah.
It's theirs now once they buy it. George said he couldn't just give up control. And Disney said they couldn't buy it and not control it. So twice they walked away from the deal. Disney walked away the first time. George Lucas walked away the second time. So they kept giving up on the deal, but kept coming back to it too.
Yeah.
At some point in the negotiations, Lucas disclosed that he had outlined 3 new movies.
Oh, by the way.
Well, he'd always said that he was going to do a trilogy of trilogies. After he did the prequels, he said, I'm not going to do any more. Didn't mean that he didn't have the story for it.
Well, I mean, he always had the story generally.
Generally.
Kind of. Yeah.
Which I'll talk a little bit about something I read, because it just reminded me of it when we get to kind of the end of things here.
Okay.
And we're talking more about movies here. So because he had these outlined stories, it was decided that in the deal, Disney needed to buy the rights to these movies. But even though Disney bought the outlines to the new movies, they made it clear in the deal that they were not obligated to use them for the films. So basically, they were buying these things to make sure that George Lucas didn't do something with it outside of Disney.
Makes sense. I get it.
And if they did want to use the stories, they could.
Yeah.
There were also new capital gains laws in 2012 that created some urgency to close the deal. If Lucas didn't sell by the end of 2012, he would take a $500 million hit on the sale. While he didn't like it, Lucas knew that Iger wasn't going to budge on creative control and had to accept that he would just be available to consult if requested. Like the outlines to the movies, Disney would be under no obligation to consult with Lucas on anything.
Yeah.
So they could. If they needed his help, they'd call him and ask him what he thought, but they didn't have to.
I mean, I feel like the fans, though, because it has such a cult following, if it ended up coming out that, like, Disney blatantly went against what George Lucas wanted or had in mind, like, they would catch a lot of heat for it.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm like, just don't sell your company then if you want to remain completely in control of it.
If you have that many hang-ups about it. And I think that's kind of one of those things where he's given up his baby. It's like he doesn't want to keep doing this, but it's also his creation.
Like,
so you got to...
He doesn't want to make any more movies, but he's like, oh, by the way, here's the idea for these movies.
And it's just a matter, too, though, of it's really hard to be like, well, I have all this, and this is an empire I've created. Haha, pun intended, the empire. He created it, and he's saying, yes, I want to let you do this. I want you to take over the helm, but also have it in mind that he could just be off into the sunset and we'll never hear from him again.
I feel like he just really wants to live his best life here with all the dollars, but, you know.
I mean, yeah, he does. I mean, the fact that he wanted to maintain and do everything, just get $4 billion to do it.
Yeah, no kidding.
But on October 30th, 2012, George Lucas emotionally signed away LucasFilms.
Emotionally?
Emotionally. He was sad about it because he had officially, in particular, given up Star Wars.
Okay, gotcha.
Other details behind the deal. A few months before they closed on the deal, George Lucas hired Kathy Kennedy to be in charge of Lucasfilms. Kathy and her husband had founded Amblin Entertainment, which produced E.T. and Jurassic Park.
Oh, okay.
So, we know who they are. We didn't necessarily know who they were.
Yeah, like, now that you say the name and what it's associated with, I can totally picture the logo in my head and everything, so...
Exactly, and they put out some big movies.
Yeah. I love me some Jurassic Park.
We do love Jurassic Park. Like you mentioned, we had done our binge on the whole franchise not too long ago.
Fun.
Disney was surprised he had hired someone to run a company he was about to sell. And Kathy was equally surprised to find out that the company she had just been hired to be in charge of was about to be sold.
Yeah, I'd be a little salty if I was Kathy.
I'd be a little salty there, and it sounds like, from what I read, everything was kept in line. She still had her job. A little bit different parameters, but...
Good. I'd still
be
a little salty. Like, you could have given me, like, a BT dubs.
Right, to get hired on and then find out that within a few months your job could be in jeopardy or the parameters of your job title could change. They convinced J.J. Abrams to direct their first movie.
Okay.
They also hired on Michael Arndt, who wrote Toy Story 3 and Little Miss Sunshine. He was brought to write the script for the first movie. Iger had known Abrams from ABC since Abrams had done Alias and Lost.
I love Alias.
You love Alias. We tried to do Lost, but we lost our interest in that one.
Ha.
Ha ha.
I mean, we watched most of it.
I think we stopped like halfway through the third season because that's when they started doing.
Weird.
They got weird with it. That's also when they started doing those like mid-season finales. So they end it
Oh,
halfway
yeah.
through, and then you'd have to wait a few months to see it again, so it gave you enough time to forget what was going on. And that was
Yeah.
such a busy show as it was.
It was hard. Well, yeah, it just got weird. Anyways.
Yeah. So they knew that the success of the first movie was going to set the tone for the success of the acquisition of LucasFilms.
For sure.
Iger once joked with Abrams that the first movie was a $4 billion movie. It was a joke that Abrams did not find funny.
I don't really think Bob Iger was kidding, though.
Yeah, I think that was a like, hey, I'm just kidding, but seriously, though.
Yeah, like, hey, BT dubs, haha, but really.
Yeah. Iger emphasized to Abrams that he was a partner in the production of the first Star Wars film, not made by George Lucas, and not just a CEO putting pressure on his director. Abrams and Arndt were taken to see George Lucas at his ranch to tell him the ideas they had for the new movie.
So in my mind, this is just now George Lucas sitting out by his pool in like some skimpy little swimsuit with like a drink, being like, enjoying his $4 billion and still just telling these guys, what's what.
I mean, pretty much, because I don't know about the whole Speedo and drink by the pool thing, but Lucas did get upset during this meeting because as they described their ideas, he realized that they were not using the outlines he had written for the next 3 movies.
Well, someone gave up control of their company.
He did, and Lucas knew there was no obligation for Disney to use the outlines, but he had assumed that since they were bought with the treatments, that meant they were going to use them. So, I think George Lucas had it in his mind that it was just a formality that they were saying that they didn't have any obligation to use it.
I really feel like this guy is very full of himself. I mean, I understand why, but at the same time.
Right. And again, he's giving up the one thing he's known for.
Okay, it's not like it's a little thing.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's not a little thing. That's why he's so sensitive to it.
I know, but I don't know if I like this guy as a person right now.
Well, you've never met him.
I know. It's valid.
Granted, there's some more things coming up that might validate your opinion, though. Bob Iger did feel bad, and he felt like he could have given Lucas the heads up that they were going in a different direction with the story. And he felt that he could have made sure Lucas wasn't surprised in the meeting and avoided the feelings of betrayal.
It's a lot of feelings to care about.
It's a lot of feelings, especially when, again, we're preserving a legacy, but it's still a business deal.
Yeah.
You got $4.05 billion. Calm down a little.
Again, he didn't want to make the movies.
Right. There were other issues after the acquisition. Michael Arndt struggled with the screenplay and was eventually replaced by Larry Kasdan, who had co-written Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi with George Lucas.
Okay, that seems like a good, switch.
Yeah, a little switch there, and you've got someone from the original movies on board now.
Yeah, makes sense. Someone who's worked with George Lucas.
Right. Kind of knew what he would like, maybe, and
yeah,
what the tone was. The new movie had started filming in the spring of 2014. Now here's where we get to why the May streak broke and films were released in December.
Gotcha.
It wasn't just to give us movies around Christmas time.
Okay.
Originally, they wanted to release the movie in May of 2015, but because they had to bring someone else on to write the script, those delays pushed it to December.
Okay, I mean, makes sense, but I feel like essentially the script is probably literally the most important part.
Well, yeah, which is why you need to have that in place.
You kind of need to have, yeah.
This took the movie out of the 2015 fiscal year, and when Iger had presented the acquisition to the board and to the investors, it was billed as seeing a return in 2015 with the release of the movie in May. However, with the movie moving to the next fiscal year, returns weren't seen until 2016. Not a huge deal, but it had gone against what Iger had presented and contradicted what he said to get the deal approved in the first place.
I mean, life happens.
Life happens. It wasn't a huge deal, but it was still something they had to address with the board.
Yeah.
Iger was fine giving up the release date as he was afraid that keeping the May date would lead to a rushed movie that would sacrifice creative decisions.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good.
Right. He was concerned that if they put out a bad movie, the fan base would turn on them.
Oh, for sure.
Yep. Absolutely, especially like you said, it's the first Star Wars movie that George Lucas didn't make. And if you screw it up...
It was going to be under scrutiny, no matter what.
It's already under scrutiny, and you screw it up, you're dead in the water.
Yeah.
Prior to the release of the movie, George Lucas watched a screening of The Force Awakens. That was episode 7.
Cool, thanks.
Yep, you're welcome. Lucas was open with his disappointment in the movie, stating, "There's nothing new, and there weren't enough visual and technical leaps forward."
Again, some harsh criticism for a guy who didn't want to do it.
He's not wrong, though.
Well, I don't know.
It was basically, well, you'll find out when we watch it. In my opinion, it was just a rehash of A New Hope and completely undid everything of the original trilogy. So, George Lucas isn't wrong. I side with George Lucas on that.
Fine. I still stand by he didn't want to do it.
True. And Iger felt they were intentionally making it look like the worlds from the original trilogy to keep them connected. But Lucas preferred the idea of new worlds, creatures, and characters. Iger also opted not to put the Disney name in any of the credits or logos. He had done the same thing with Marvel.
They did the same thing with Touchstone Pictures even, way back when.
Well, Touchstone was a subsidiary of Disney.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. But still, they didn't lay claim to, like, Nightmare Before Christmas until well after.
Right. But the big reason being for this is Bob Iger wanted to convey that he respected the Star Wars universe and that he was trying to preserve the legacy, not take it over.
Okay, I get it.
That's why he didn't put the Disney logo on things.
Well, and then if people are mad because the movie sucks, it doesn't have the Disney name on it.
Yeah, but everybody knows Disney bought it. That's not going to change it.
I mean...
It was more of a gesture in good faith and goodwill.
It's a gesture of, like, here, we put your name on this crappy movie out of respect.
Right. So although Lucas didn't like the movie, Iger felt it was important to come to the premiere. Even though he didn't want to, Lucas did go to the premiere of the movie.
Aww.
Lucas had also signed a non-disparagement clause in the deal. Basically, he couldn't openly talk trash about the Disney movies and how they handled Star Wars.
Ooh, good move, Disney.
Yeah, it was. But Lucas also stated that because he was going to be a big shareholder at Disney, he would have no reason to disparage something he had a stake in.
Okay, valid.
The movie was a box office success. But then George Lucas did an interview with Charlie Rose. In the interview, he expressed his frustration with Disney. He expressed that he was upset that they didn't use his outlines. So basically, he's going against the non-disparagement clause here.
Sounds...
Here comes the biggie. Lucas said that selling to Disney was like selling his children to quote-unquote white slavers.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Whoa!
So there goes his non-disparagement clause.
Wow!
Bob Iger took the high road. He didn't make a big stink about it. He didn't even address it. So Lucas did call Iger and express remorse for what he said, and that he was just trying to express that it was hard for him to let go of Star Wars. So he wasn't necessarily trying to disparage what they had done, even though I think he kind of was.
I mean, he sounds like he's being a big spoiled baby.
A little bit. And that's an extreme statement to say, oh, I just didn't want to get rid of Star Wars. So yeah, that was. I remember when that came out too. It was a big old headline, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah, no kidding. Can we just take a minute to talk about how Bob Iger is truly, I think, just an amazing person. To like be able to. I'm sure he was upset by it, but to not like outwardly react to it.
Right. He didn't see any productivity in outwardly reacting to it.
I mean, I know one day we will cover in an episode like just the history of the CEOs of Disney, like Eisner versus Iger, and like because Michael Eisner would not have handled that.
Michael Eisner would not have been so dignified about it, I don't think.
Yeah. So we'll venture down that rabbit hole.
We'll get there eventually.
But wow.
So Bob Iger has acknowledged that he feels they put out too many Star Wars films too quickly.
Well, one every other year is a lot.
It's a lot because since they bought it, we've had 5 films. We had the new sequel trilogy plus Rogue One and Solo.
See, again, that's just so many movies to watch, Will.
It's a lot of movies, and yeah, they put out a lot in a really short amount of time. Now, that's not to say Bob Iger is expressing his disappointment in the films, but rather that he feels that Star Wars is something special and that they shouldn't have blown it out so quickly. They should have taken their time to really keep some of the novelty of it.
I mean, I agree.
It's a lot. So that's the acquisition to LucasFilms. And want to get your thoughts real quick before I give some of mine.
Oh, my thoughts are I don't like George Lucas, and Bob Iger is a much nicer human than a vast majority of people on Earth.
At least that we see on the surface dealing with business deals. Granted, I am a big fan of Bob Iger. I love what he did with Disney.
Yeah.
However, it's not often that something Disney does disappoints me. But the Star Wars movies, the new trilogy in particular, I really liked Rogue One. And the reason I liked Rogue One so much is because it's a prequel to A New Hope. So it added to the original trilogy.
Okay.
The sequel trilogies, to me, just completely undo the original trilogy. And they're essentially a rehash of the original trilogy.
Do you think they're going to pull like a Marvel and like remake them like how they remade the Spider-Man movies? Do you think they'll pull that
I don't know
day?
that they'll do that.
Because they would have to essentially make a different script
they
and
would.
Everything, like change the story.
Right. And Jon Favreau, he's done multiple Disney projects. He did the Lion King, the Jungle Book, those remakes. And then he also was the one behind The Mandalorian.
Gotcha.
Because of how well The Mandalorian's done, so many people are like, just put Jon Favreau in charge of Star Wars from here on out.
Gotcha.
But they have said that there is going to be a new trilogy film somewhere down the road. As I mentioned previously, they're taking a break from putting out movies. Because again, they put out too much too fast. But the new trilogy isn't going to have anything to do with the Skywalker saga. I think they're finally putting that to bed and moving on from it.
So it'll still take place in that universe, but
it's still a Star Wars canon universe, but they're stepping away from the Skywalker saga now.
I mean, that's probably for the best.
I agree. Like I said, that's where the one time Disney did disappoint me. I just don't think they did a good job with those movies. I mean, even the prequel movies that George Lucas did, those were bad movies, but it was more so they were bad because of the actors they picked. But the trilogy still added to the story of the original.
You weren't a fan of Jar Jar Binks?
Not a fan of Jar Jar Binks.
I mean, I can't comment too much on them because I really haven't seen them, and I haven't watched any Star Wars films in such a long time. I truly feel like after those first three, because they were such a hit and there's such a cult following, the first three meaning 4 through 6, I feel like there is just no way to ever live up to that.
Right.
So no matter what, I feel like these movies could have been amazing, but I feel like people still would have been like, oh, that sucks. I don't like it.
There's going to be picky people regardless. You're going to have those diehards that are just picky about it regardless.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be good for them to step away from the Skywalker saga and just put in some new material, because I think that's where they're going to see a little more success. That's my opinion anyway.
And I still don't like George Lucas. You can't change my mind on that.
That's okay. I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm just saying I agree with him that the Star Wars movies under Disney are a little disappointing.
Whatever. He's spoiled.
That's just my 2 cents. But that's episode 2 of our Star Wars trilogy.
What's next week?
Next week, we're going to look at the parks. We're going to get into the attractions of Star Wars at the Disney parks.
Okay, cool. I was like, we haven't even done the rides yet.
Haven't even gotten to the rides yet, but that's next week.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
No problem. That's it for this week's episode of Ashes and Will Do Disney.
Don't forget, we need your mouse tails. If you have a funny, weird, exciting, or just a favorite Disney memory, send it to ashesandwilldodisney@gmail.com so we can read them on the show.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Ashes and Will Do Disney. This is a public group to follow. We're also on YouTube at Ashes and Will Do Disney.
Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening, and have a magical day.